I'm live. Does this work? Who's out there? Dean? Is anybody watching? Scott, are you still there? I don't know what I think of this. Now I have an audience that's not talking to me. And most of you probably type a lot slower than I do as well. I can type 120 words a minute. That's what my comedy's all been about is, I want to eventually make it big enough in comedy where I can really do something with my typing. I want to be on the cover of QWERTY today. Hello, Dean Harkness. How are you? Does anybody have any questions? Or I was going to start off with a song. I wrote this a couple of years ago in Manchester, and it's based on the sound of women's high heel shoes as they're walking down the street. And it goes, clippity clop, cloppity cloop. This is a woman on high heel shoes. Ooh, yeah. Oh, my. She's on the hunt for a brand new guy. Her husband left her late last night following another fight. Tears were running down her cheek. But now's not the time to be meek. Put your shoes on, honey, and earn your money. So a bit of a hat tip to streetwalkers. Any questions on anything in the news? Not that I watch the news anymore, but I'll pause and let somebody. We've had a hello from Dean, and this is a bit nerve-wracking. I feel like I wanted to do something, but I wanted to experiment with this. Now, does anybody know if this actually becomes a video that people can watch later, or is it wiped clean the moment I press end stream? Does anybody know? Anybody? The great thing about the internet is it allows us to stay connected throughout what I call a global marketplace. Any questions? Should I type something? I'll type that. I'll type any questions. This is like now, yeah, this is not good because it stays on YT. Okay, thank you, Dean. Scott, Megan, anybody that says they were going to show up here? I'm starting to panic because I want to do a whole hour, but I don't know. Now I realize I have a silent audience. That's the worst kind of audience. Actually, the worst kind of audience is a talkative audience because they interrupt the flow. But people that are paying attention to you, that's the ideal, and laughing. A silent audience you can work with. You just kind of have to suck up into your own mind and not give a damn. But so how many people are watching? It doesn't say on here. Scott, do you have a question? Bearing in mind certain topics are off limits. Do you have a question, Scott? Scott types very slowly. I think that's... Does anybody else type 120 words a minute? Here less. Scott, can you hear me? No, Dean must have been able to hear me. That's why he answered my question. This had a 4-minute warning. People need a lot longer, so there must be a way to let subscribers know several hours beforehand. I know this was spur of the moment. Maybe I should restart and do one of those regular vids. Does anyone want to see a bit? Should I do a bit? I can do my Peckham Fire Brigade bit, if you like. Scott, do you have a question? Hello? Hey, man. Go on, give us a bit. Okay. This is a long one. Oh, why? We're shy. Talk about feminism. I'm so fed up with it. The trouble is non-feminists are all on their own, not in a group. This is from Telefaso Rose. Okay. The trouble is non-feminists are all on their own, not in a group. That's right, because to be a non-feminist is to be somebody who, in that instance, steps away from the collective. And just by virtue of being an individual, you are going to be spread out all over the place. And it's a bit like, I guess, the Jews in the Warsaw Ghetto. You'd have to pass secret messages, like, are you not a feminist too? Yes, you're safe with me. Come, I will introduce you to people. And that's what you do. You just introduce them to people of like minds. And I guess that's why this alternative media is really going to take off one day. What was I thinking of? The Kavanaugh getting through, I believe, is the death. I mean, that's the ultimate death knell for the Me Too movement. Because an alpha male came out, he stood by his choice, he didn't back down, and Kavanaugh got through. And I actually think it's going to have a positive effect in the midterms. And this is why we need people like Trump. Some people think I'm taking the piss when I say, I've mentioned this before, like I'll do a gig and people say, oh, I love political incorrectness. I love the way you push the envelope. And then they'll find out I voted for Trump. And they'll say, that was shock. Like, how could you vote for Trump? And to me, it's just obvious. We need somebody in office who is going to use the least amount of words, I believe, to describe what the hell's going on. So when it comes to the Ford thing, when did it happen? I don't know. We need somebody who's going to be very blunt, and I think that bluntness is going to continue to puncture these narratives. Give us a bit. Okay, I'm going to give you a bit. Some of us self-identify as anti-feminist. That's pretty interesting. Let me just answer these questions real quick. Some of us self-identify as anti-feminist. I did a gig a couple years ago, maybe last year, for it was a men's rights group. And I was very insistent that they shouldn't call themselves men's rights, because it just one more victim group. We go, rights, we want our rights. It's just more segregation of society. And I thought, if you had to call yourself something, I would say anti-feminist. I believe it's better in this day and age to be anti than victims' rights. So just be anti. Anti is a force right now, but not Antifa. Remember, statues never hurt no one, no how, no way. Okay, give us a bit. How much engine you have in you? I took my DNA test at about the same time that Pocahontas did, Senator Warren. Mine came up 57% Chinese Negro. But I'm not going out there and I'm not waving a bunch of banners going, hey, can I have free university admission? That's just who I am. It's incidental to who I am. I live with the fact that I'm, 57% Chinese Negro. And where are you, Telephassa Rose? We need Trump here and his policies and directness so badly. Where are you again? Are you in the UK? Telephassa Rose. We'll wait for her to answer that. Let me think of a short bit. Let me try to do this one live. No, that's too difficult to do live. I need sound cues for this one. Let me start the Peckham Fire Brigade, and then we'll finish it. Oh yes, I think I know who I'm speaking to. Yes. I get the last name, but the first name I think was coded. Okay, so let me do the Peckham Fire Brigade. I'll start this one. It's slow, but just bear with me. There's a phone call at a fire station. Peckham Fire Brigade. Yes, I see. Yes, thank you. Ladies, gentlemen, firefighters all. 5 seconds ago, this fire station received a rather distressing dispatch, and I shall do my utmost to convey the contents of that dispatch to you at the present. At this very moment, I need an address. Does anybody have an address for somewhere in Peckham? Let's say 15. By the way, the floofnoofs are in the kitchen. Does everybody know what a floofnoof is? Eastern European people who spend lots of time in the kitchen, don't work, and when they do speak, their speaking voice is about 2 decibels higher than your native English speaker. At least it seems that way. I need an address at this very moment. Let's say 1530, not Edgware Road, Peckham. Let's just make up a 1530 Vicarage Lane. At this very moment, at 1530 Vicarage Lane, a small house is currently ablaze, with flames that threaten not only the property of its inhabitants, but the very lives of those inhabitants, which at the present consist of 4 small and defenseless children facing a peril that not even their own childlike imaginations could have possibly concocted. Distressing news indeed. Yet I cannot help but smile to feel that the anguished mother who shared a rather brief discourse with the 999 operator a few seconds ago must have felt some relief to know that her maternal cries for help would not fall upon unreceptive ears. For they have fallen upon receptive. I fucked it up. I'm so sorry. For they have fallen upon receptive ears. For, ladies and gentlemen, we are the Fire Brigade. And it is our God-given duty to set forth from this station with all the haste and urgency such as the present situation demands. But before we make our way to 1530 Vicarage Lane, that fucking cunt, she communicates in squeals, this fucking, what is she, a slag. That's it, a slag, an actual mound of lumpy coal residue. That's it, just a different color, just a white, lumpy, you fucking bastards. Now the fucking other one in there. Okay. This requires a lot of concentration. Floofnoof, yeah, Storbank, how you doing, man? Floofnoof. He's got floof. The floofnoofs are active now. Okay. Okay, where was I in the bit? You get it, though. It's a really slow, ponderous speech before saving lives. It's all about time. Time is of the essence. Bastards. Okay. And again. Extinguish the ravaging blaze and to save the lives of these innocent children, I feel it's imperative at this historical juncture that we first stop and reflect upon what it means to be a firefighter. Thank you, Marcus. And what do we as firefighters feel about the element of fire that we are fighting as compared to those of air, earth, or indeed water? Would we as firefighters advocate the abolition of all forms of light and heat that have fire as their chief source? If the means were with at our disposal, would we travel backwards in time to that moment when primeval man first laid flint to stone and discourage him from so doing? And lastly, what of that centerpiece of our solar system, the sun? Nothing more than a massive sphere of flame and fire. Would we as firefighters wish to see it blotted out from the sky, banished forevermore from our universe simply because of its fiery constitution? No, no, and 1,000 times no. For we firefighters are but the moderators of the element of fire. We are the tamers of its flame. And although we must recognize the manifold gifts that the element of fire has bestowed upon our civilization, we must at the same time acknowledge a periodic need for containment. And such is the present case at 1530 Vicarage Lane, where 4 understandably frightened children are crying out to us now through smoke and flame to save them and to preserve their precious, precious lives. Indeed, if it were not for the firefighters' art of fire containment, our own earth would soon be ravaged by flames to the point where it became in time nothing more than another sun. And perhaps like our solar predecessor, giving off our own light and heat to some distant alternate earth. And while this would be an astronomically noble sacrifice benefiting the inhabitants of that hypothetical planet, it would most assuredly spell destruction for the inhabitants of this planet, including ourselves and the 4 children whom we are to save today. So, as you alight from this station in your engines of red, lights flashing, sirens blaring, take time amidst the hustle and bustle to ask yourselves, who will save the children? Will you save the children? Or will the children save themselves? Am I a child which must be saved? If the answer is no, the child is not you, but must be saved by you. For we are the fire brigade, you are firefighters, and this is our finest hour. Hip, hip, hooray, hip, hooray. Now, here comes the punchline. The phone rings again. Hip, hip, hooray. Peckham Fire Brigade. Yes, we were just... Have they? Yes, I see. Ladies and gentlemen, it appears that great behemoth time has once more gotten the better of us. I have just received word that the children, along with the house, have sadly perished. Reduced to ashes, obliterated by flame. Such is the want of uncontained fire. Yet let us not be despondent. Let us not wallow in self-pity. Rather, let us take comfort that as our sun shall continue to burn, so too shall other houses on this planet continue to burn. And so there will always be a need for firefighters and our craft. And as we go out from here today, let us never ever forget the sad tragedy of the 4 children of 1530 Vicarage Lane. For this was their finest hour. Hip, hip, hooray! So that's the bit. It used to be the Oakland Fire Department. Then I moved out here, and the joke was, the idea of, I had this when I was living in New York because I moved to Harlem because it was cheap, because the middle class white liberals who go on about racism pay more to live away and to segregate the island of Manhattan. They pay most of them pay about 3 times as much as what I paid in rent for a studio. And I had 2 bedrooms to myself in Harlem, because that's the racism of the white middle class liberals. And some of you in America might remember this. I don't know if this, like Tom and Jerry or some of those cartoons, they would always play slow music. If there was a slow cartoon, it would always go, something slow motion was happening. And I thought that would be the sirens for Harlem, right? Or Oakland or Peckham. Everything slows down. A bit cynical, I suppose, but the same premise is what inspired me to write the Oakland Fire Department, which later became the Peckham Fire Brigade. So Telephassa Rose says it's a bit like what is happening to our Brexit. Too slow. That's really good. Maybe it's timely for Brexit. That is really good. I hadn't thought of that, because sometimes it seems like, I don't know, all my writing is inspirational, and you can't really wait around for inspiration. So sometimes you do have to just force yourself. I think in a lot of ways, that's why I make these videos. I think that's the primary thing, is to just feel like if an idea comes up, like just performing that just now, I forgot how much I really like that bit. And it's really good with the sound. Usually I get a plant from the audience to bring up a telephone on a butler's tray. And then it's very dignified. And, I used to have one of those big old fashioned phones, old school. And it was Starlight. And I had a fire helmet, like an actual fire helmet. And, it was fun. It was very theatrical. And it would end with Churchill's, this little thing that I made, which is the Royal Scots Dragoons playing Amazing Grace on the bagpipes. And then Churchill's, is it Fight on the Beaches? It is Fight on the Beaches. We shall never surrender. And if, which I do not for a moment believe this, no, it's the last line. It's, I feel bad misquoting Churchill because he is on our fiber and he's my spirit politician. I would like to think he's my spirit politician. How's the last line go? The new world with all its power and might steps forth to the rescue and the liberation of the old. And now everything's flipped. Now it really is a case of the old world must step forth to the rescue and the liberation of the new, of the young. Because we don't, everything's been inverted. It was the adults up here and the children were down here. And now it's flipped. It's like the adults are the children and the children need some direction. Until the new world with all its power and might steps forth to the rescue and the liberation of the old. The new way, what? Democracy, freedom, liberty. Think about that. That was the new way, the new world, the new way. Nationhood, patriotism. Well, I guess you could, never mind, scratch that. Hitler had that as well in his own twisted way. But the idea of liberty, freedom from fascism, being able to say what you want and think, and the freedom to say, that was the new world. Steps forward to the rescue and the liberation of the old, where people were controlled by tyrants and dictators. And I don't know. There's so many different ways to read that line. But nowadays it would be until the old world steps forth to the rescue and the liberation of the young, because the young are enslaved. They're enslaved by screens. Telephassa Rose, being individual, thinking for oneself. Absolutely. That's what children aren't allowed nowadays, right? They come into this world, they experience emotion. Off to the psychiatrist. Thank God I got Timmy there in time. He was, I walked in on one day. He'd spilled some matches. He was counting them. What kind of child counts things? So luckily, in the nick of time, I got him into Dr. Schwarzenberg. And your connection is unstable. Fucking son of a bitch. Hey, my internet's been shit here lately. Am I still on? Here, I'll type that. God damn, let me see if the internet's still up. Is everybody there? It should be up. Am I still on? Yes, good, okay. Was there a blackout earlier? How long did the blackout last? It's funny because I was talking about World War II, so it might have happened when it just buffers a bit. Okay, but you still get the whole 9 people are watching. Holy fuck. I've never played for 9 people before. 8 people, yes. 10 people, possibly, but 9. Good. Very short. Okay, cool. I was talking about, the new world steps forth, right? So children are being enslaved. Buffers for a few seconds, then carries on. Yeah. Children are being denied their individuality. So we take them. Did you all see did I do the The neurotic parent taking their child to the psychiatrist in the nick of time. He was OCD. I never would have known if I hadn't taken him to Dr. Schwarzenberg. His head might have fallen off. Who knows? Right, the neurosis, right? There's a great line in Frank Zappa did a satire of Sgt. Pepper's called "We're Only in It for the Money." Zappa was a genius, as we all know. I'm assuming most of us on here are Zappa fans. Because even if you don't like the man's music, you have to respect his attitudes about things and about liberty and individuality. He was very vocal about all that in his own way. But in that album, "We're Only in It for the Money," he was basically satirizing the whole hippie movement. And there's a song called "Flower Punk," and it's a hippie being asked various questions, and it's the more typical Frank Zappa late '60s weirdness. And it's going to, "Hey punk, where you going with that flower in your hand? Hey punk, where you going with that flower in your hand? I'm going up to Frisco and be in a psychedelic band." It's a bunch of questions and answers, right? With this weird music going underneath. And one of my favorites is the guy says, "Hey punk, where you going with those beads around your neck? Hey punk, where you going with those beads around your neck? I'm going to see my shrink so he can help me be a nervous wreck." I mean, that about sums it up, doesn't it? I think about that. That was 67, 68. I mean, you talk about forward thinking, right? I'm going to my shrink so he can help me be a nervous wreck. And who's he talking to? He's talking to probably a middle-class hippie who had the time and the money to experiment with slumming it, with going out to the woods and living free, and then every now and then popping back into the shrink to make sure he's still neurotic, Zappa was and still is ahead of his time. Absolutely. I was trying to I can't find this interview, but there was an interview with him because Scott, are you still there? When Scott and I made Red, White, and Blake, we feature Zappa in a clip on Contrarians because my favorite Blake quote of all time is, "Without contraries is no progression." And that's where we're living today. We're living in this big status quo that calls itself progression, which is the ultimate lie. And you need a contrary in order for thought to survive. Just basic human thought to actually survive. You need a contrary. So it's a very timely quote. "Without contraries is no progression." And if you haven't seen the sequence, Ride of the Valkyries is playing all throughout. We got the Apocalypse Now imagery, guns. I mean, beautiful sounding, just, cannons. And it's like what Kubrick, I got to find that Kubrick quote. If anybody knows that Kubrick quote, fire it my way because I'm paraphrasing here. It was Stanley Kubrick found a certain beauty to war. So it's something, if you Google like Stanley Kubrick beauty war, you might come up with it, but that it was undeniable, that there was a certain beauty. Like, in the broadest sense of the word, there's a certain beauty to war because you have these things now that are antiquated. They're totally stripped from our culture. It's one thing not to have glory in the present day and age, but the universities now want to get rid of mentions of past glory. Like the idea of glory ever existing is a shameful thing. And I think that has a lot to do with third wave feminism, actually. But so the clip we chose, it was a rapid fire sequence of people we think were contraries. Sex Pistols, the Bill Grundy interview, "You fucking rotter," that, and then we've got, but it was 1, 2. It started off with Farage, Trump. It was like these are the contraries of our day and age. I really love the way that worked out because I have to talk about the sequence if you don't mind, because we need contraries. That's what the world desperately needs right now. So when that sequence first starts off, dun, 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 which all begins with Christ's sword slashing the world into two, then you got John Lennon, Michael Savage, I forget who, Lenny Bruce, not Richard Pryor yet, but Lenny Bruce. So you start off, and the idea was for even leftists to look at this and go, "Yeah, these were cutting edge people. They were contraries." And then the second round, in comes Marine Le Pen, Nigel Farage, Donald Trump, boom, boom, boom. And it's like, you can just imagine people getting slapped in the face going, "Wait, I thought this was a Blake documentary." It is a Blake documentary. And this is real life Blake happening in our world today. Brexit, Trump, fuck you to the system, right? I must create a system of being enslaved by another man's. Boom, 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 right? And then it comes back with me shooting a record player that's playing Ride of the Valkyries with a yin yang symbol on it. Boom. And it goes back into the third round of contraries, and which I believe that one starts off with Frank Zappa. And the clip I chose was he's being interviewed by MTV, and he says, I mean, come on, artificial music. You guys must know MTV. I mean, so there he is. The idea of him being on the station and giving it two fingers. Then come the Sex Pistols, Richard Pryor talking about, I hope you get gang raped by a bunch of black folk with clap. You know, just a pure fuck you punk of it all. And it ends with Churchill, machine guns going off. You know, we will teach them a lesson that they and the world will never forget. You know. And but the Frank Zappa one, if anybody can find this, I think it was close to the time that he died, and he was talking about his use of puerile scatological lyrics, and what he said reminded me of that bit that I do where I take the piss out of the 50 Shades of Grey liberation, you know, empowerment bullshit. When I say, "Do you like hot, wet, drippy pussies? Are you ready for the most fucktastic, cum-filled night of your life? How would you like to jizz all over your cum? If you like hot girl-on-girl dominatrix action, then come to the Center for Cultural Expression this Saturday," right? And there was something in that when I watched that Zappa interview, if anybody can find that on his use of puerile scatological lyrics, there was something I said, he was of the same mentality as I was, that everything is reduced, like sexuality is stripped of love, and therefore it's just reduced to, it almost becomes bland, right? Because it's squirt, squirt, drip, drip, milk, milk, cum, cum, drip, drip, squirt, right? Because it's devoid of its romance, you know. And I think Zappa in that interview, he echoed the same refrain. Not to mention the lie. I don't think he was dealing. I mean, he wouldn't have been dealing as heavily with this empowerment nonsense. My bit was inspired by the empowerment stuff, which you saw in San Francisco all the time. You know, empowerment seminar. Don't be afraid of your vaginas. It all started with the vagina monologues. It was like, she wrote a monologue about vaginas, you know, and the next thing you know, it was blah, blah, blah. It was every female comedian of the this and that. I got my fucking labia pierced, and yeah, I don't give a fuck about that because I take shits too, guys, you know. And then women became vulgar, you know, not all of them, but, you know, like this new, you know, the pussy hat people. They put on the pussy hats and, you know, and they dance around. They talk about, he's not going to get his hands on my cunt, you know, out in public. You don't even know their name, right? Think about it. I mean, I love when women swear. I really do. I like when women use like crude colloquialisms. But if you're just walking down the street and you see a big sign that says cunt and they got a vagina hat on, it's like, I don't know. It's like, come on, like you're retarded. Yeah, rattle some dishes. Good, good. Okay, Telephassa Rose. Shame and pride are sort of contraries. So many regressives seem to feel neither. Let me meditate on that just for a second. Shame and pride are sort of contraries. Not with each other, though, right? No. Yeah, shame and pride are contraries. Progressives, she's saying progressives neither feel shame. I get that. Yeah. Pussy hats, screaming, blatant ugliness, blatant stupidity, right? Presuming every male is toxic and every white man is privileged. I mean, absolute idiocy, right? So they don't have shame and pride. You know what? Really, let's take the word pride real quick. Because I go to Co-op to get my cigarettes sometimes, and on the registers, they've got these little computerized things with rainbows, and it says Co-op celebrates pride. And then sometimes I go to Barclays, and on the screen, before you put your card in, it'll say, you know, it'll have a picture of a lesbian couple. Like, you know, hey, Barclays helping everybody, you know, like they're holding hands or whatever. Barclays pride, you know, all this stuff. And it's entirely a corporate thing. You know, it's a money thing. It's like, yeah, we you know, we might not have liked you 30 years ago, but we like you now because we realize you buy cucumbers in our shop, you know, or whatever. I mean, who knows why I said that, but so it's a financial thing, but it's not really pride, you know. It's like, right, what is pride? So do progressives feel pride? Not in nation. They definitely don't feel pride in nation. In fact, they find it repulsive, which itself is shameless. You know, especially a nation as great as Great Britain, or if I may say so myself, the United States, with unique histories, which unique cultural outputs. Yeah, it's a very shameful thing not to feel pride in that. So I would agree with that. Let's move on to Marcus. I wish I had some glasses here. Marcus Bachelli. A new tendency, pop culture stalwarts pushing themselves to the cutting edge of consensus, standing four square behind such as the European Commission, which beggared half of Europe in the decade. Oh, that's my friend John Waters. That's right. I read this. And I was supposed to be on a Spectator podcast. And John, my mate John Waters, the Irish dissident, whose many books I have up here, I highly recommend Feckers, 50 People Who Fecked Up Ireland. A very funny read, and you'd be surprised at who the list includes. He wrote an article for The Spectator last week, and he he sent me a text, and The Spectator wanted to have me on as part of a podcast to discuss that article. And at the last minute, they had to reshuffle and make the recording for that day. So hopefully they'll get me again soon. But I read the article and it's great. And another comment from Marcus here, today's rock and rollers are so wet and wussy. Absolutely. John used to write for Hot Press, which was Ireland's version of the NME. And so he came into writing basically as a rock and roll fan, as somebody who understood the ethos of rock and roll. And so I really love the fact that he, to this day, makes that kind of the primary thesis of his politics as well. And so when him and I sit down, we talk about David Bowie. We talk about, where the fuck are the David Bowies? What would they have done to David Bowie today? What the hell would John Lennon be doing today? I happen to believe John Lennon, being the natural contrarian he was, would be pushing against this. I honestly, especially if Paul McCartney, I hate to admit this, recently released an album where I think he insulted Trump. I don't know if by name, but it definitely was a reference to climate change. So he did write a song about the whole climate change religion. And I think if he was still doing that, just to be contrary, to John Lennon would definitely be saying fuck Palestine or whatever. But but that's a great article from Waters in is it This Week's Spectator? Yeah, I don't know what that was. I don't know what that was like, being married to that individual. And to be honest, we don't really talk about it. We kind of, I tell you one thing, the first debate I ever did, I can wax about John for a while, because some of you don't know how we had this instant friendship, and we met at this 2 years ago at the Battle of Ideas. It was a panel on Trump, and it was just immediately we both respected like a fellow fighter. And he was 2 seats away from me, and he was so pissed off with the panel because every one of them, including The Spectator, were saying that Trump would never win, and here's why. And John got the microphone before me, and he slagged off Bruce Springsteen. And it was such because Bruce Springsteen had been speaking out against Trump, and John's question had to do with, I'd like to know what kind of elitist Bruce Springsteen is, if he's going to put down the man that the very people he writes songs about who are going to vote for. Because they quoted Bruce Springsteen. So it was like, boom. And then he handed the microphone to me, and I could tell there's a kind of shaking that comes after an angry outburst, and before, and he could tell that I was just as livid as he was. And when he handed the microphone to me, I hadn't even met the guy before. He says, "Don't be too angry now," kind of like with a, give him hell, And I called him, back in July, when they wanted me to be on my first ever debate. And it wasn't much of a debate. It was me with this short little snowflake kid. And they put me on with, I was supposed to debate the Lord Mayor of Sheffield, but he canceled at 1 a.m. the night before. So they got this little snowflake kid on. And I was a bit nervous because I've barely done any live television at all. And it was my first, debate, like one of those arguments. Fuck you. They want, it's cheap entertainment, isn't it? And I'm coming in handy now, because I'm the lone Trump voter in comedy, which is fine, but they put me on with him, and I called John the night before because I know he'd been on these debates, and it's like, well, any tips, any secrets, and it was great because he just talked boxing language to me, and just go out there and give him hell, and now's your time, and all that. I felt like Rocky, and he was Burgess Meredith, and the next day I went. It was the same thing that happened with Deborah Francis White. I mentioned this in one of the last videos. That I went in, and the same thing that happened in that interview. They asked me a very short question. Where are you from in America? I'm from a place called Missouri. Then they go to this kid, and it's just a million miles a minute. Misogyny, racism. This is why we don't like misogyny, racism. This is racism, sexism, racism. And then there's this thing kicked in where it's like, no, you're not getting more words than me. Like, boom, let me stop you there. Boom, boom, boom. Which I think Sky wanted, but it was clear that Radio 5 Live did not want that. Maybe it didn't make good radio, which is, I do sound stuff as well. I mean, I can imagine, especially with her shrill yawp. I was born in a... Anybody have any more questions? About 35 minutes in. I wish I had a secretary here to give me some coffee. I used to do this bit. I can't, you need another person to do the bit. Oh, wow. I never knew Will went live. Will, are you aware of the NPC meme? No, Miles, tell me, what is the NPC meme? I wish I could hear you guys. I wish I could have a call in. That'd be cool, too. Let me know what the NPC meme is. And we'll figure out if I like it or not. I'm not saying rape is good, and I'm not saying rape is bad. As politicians, we all have to make... I meant plastic straws. I do apologize. So let me know what the NPC meme is. NPC? The NPC meme is where the left just repeats the same thing and doesn't think for themselves. The NPC meme is where the left just repeats the same thing and doesn't... But what does NPC stand for, though? That is the question. No political correctness is where the non-player character. That's a video game reference. I don't even know what that means. Non-player. Let me try to put it together. Let me see if I'm right. Tell me if I'm right. I'm a non-player character. So I can just say, okay, I want to be Warhammer, the Dragon Lord, but I don't want to play. Can you guys play the character of Warhammer, the Dragon Lord? Is that what a non-player character is? I get very confused by video games because video games stopped for me after Pitfall, the Atari 26. I gave up real early with. That's not true. I did play the Mario Brothers. So I stopped at the first version of Nintendo. And then it all got a bit silly, And I wouldn't even know. Scott and I, we filmed that black guy down in South London somewhere. And he was playing it's the joke of white privilege, right? And it's the scene in the Blake film where I'm down on I'm crawling on the floor and he's got his feet up on me as a footstool and he's playing video games and he says, white privilege. It's a very funny scene. But this game he was playing was so fucking elaborate with 16 buttons. And it's like, it's too complicated. It requires too much. It's like the people in the video game that aren't the players. I got you. Okay, I got you. No, Miles, this is great. I've been wanting questions all day. Sorry, I just got here and was so excited to chat. It was the first question I could think to ask. By the way, feel free to interrupt me. I tend to talk a lot, so feel free to just puncture because I will stop. Okay, so the people in the video games that aren't the players, like the dragon in Mario Brothers, at the end when he gets the princess as well. Is that right? Because nobody's playing the dragon. He just hops around. Okay, I get it. The left just repeats the same thing and doesn't think for themselves. Well, that's what I've always thought. It's a numbers game, right? What Dean's an NPC would be one of the prostitutes in Grand Theft Auto. Okay, gotcha. I've seen that played. I've not played it myself, but I've seen it played. A couple of years ago, I was waiting for somebody to bring me some marijuana, and there was time to kill in the flat, and so I watched the other flatmate play Grand Theft Auto, waiting impatiently for the marijuana. Okay, yes, that's what I think. So if I'm at a party, let's talk about the individuality thing here again. And somebody asked very early on about feminist and what do you do if you're a non-feminist. So I'll sit let's say I'm at a dinner party and it comes out that I think the Me Too movement's gone a little bit overboard. In fact, gone very much overboard. And then they go, what? And I bring up all these stories like the Duke Lacrosse rape case, which was rape cape. I've got my rape cape on. Da, 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 da. He's got his rape cape on. Watch out. Batman, help us. Yeah, funny things can come out of Freudian slips. Well, Freudian slips are funny things. Okay, what was I talking about? Focus. That was a good point. I think maybe a good point. I don't know. So everybody says, what? And I bring up Duke Lacrosse. I bring up the Rolling Stones. Remember that? They had a character. Didn't even ask for verification. A woman who didn't even want to reveal her own name told this big story about rape and pointed all these fingers. And Rolling Stone had to turn around and apologize. After these men's lives were essentially destroyed, their names dragged through the mud. You bring up all these things. You point out the fact that, a lot of this Me Too stuff, they're not even talking about rape. They're talking about we got drunk, one thing led to another, and the next day I felt shamed, and I think that women are sometimes conditioned that they have to do that, and why was I drinking in the first place? And I think of a man, and I take away reason and accountability. Why do you write women so well? Okay, but I'm throwing all that stuff at them. But they don't have to give up. They don't have to go, oh, I didn't know about that. That's right. I forgot about that Duke lacrosse thing. I guess it isn't as black and white as I thought. You know, there's not a moment because you're always outnumbered, because collectivists by definition stick together. So what are they going to do? I mean, how powerful is that to turn around and go, I think he's crazy. I think he's crazy too. I worry for him. I do too. And then you've confirmed it so much just by the auditory of repeating it, as Miles says, where the left just repeats the same thing and don't think for themselves. Absolutely. It's a very, very powerful force. Why do you need to change your mind if you've got a bevy of friends that are going to confirm you in your bullshit? You know? And thus it is generally a lonely life, again by definition, for what was once known in our society and is fast dwindling away, the individual. He is indeed an endangered species. The individual is indeed the most oppressed minority of them all, by definition. Of course, by definition, yes. Any other questions here? Am I missing some? I'll scroll up. I'm gonna go for an hour on here. And did I leave anything behind? Feel free to interrupt me. I can handle them all. Storebang, are you still there? I have some funny stories. My friend Storebang, that's not his real name. That's his, but he briefly managed me in New York City and realized what a disaster I was. I don't know. Maybe I am the Sex Pistols. I was accused recently of being a hippie, but I think that was a gentle piss take, for I'm not a hippie. The only thing, I don't know, I'm psychedelic. I'm definitely psychedelic. But I think psychedelics I think hippies are in the politics and in the lifestyle. But punk is an ethos. Come on, somebody ask a question. Scott, are you there? Hey, where are the birds, by the way? We got one bird on here. Got a couple birds. Don't be timid. Are you Telefaster Rosa? I'll give you another bit. Vincent De Silva. That was, let me give you another bit. Let me think of a short. Do I advocate a liberal drug policy? Oh, it's a fucker. It is a fucker. You're talking about weed, right? That's a fucker. I think maybe in possibly a different age, I would. I think now we're in this meaningless hedonism. That's all our side is, right? We've either got an archaic religion on the ascendant, or we've got a kind of meaningless hedonism devoid of thought or feeling. You know, and I think a really liberal drug policy would just be like, we might as well slit our wrists just now. You know, if you're talking about smack and coke and all that, just fucking do what you want. I think that's lights out for us entirely. You know, because then basically it's just a matter of the imams coming in and sweeping us with a broom into the gutter, and then, you know, I mean, it's only used as, I think hippie has lost all meaning. Oh, I do. I absolutely do too. All drugs should be legal, and then we should choose not to use them. I agree. I do agree. I don't agree they should be legal, but I agree that we should choose not to use them. I was thinking about William Burroughs said this towards the end of his life. He was constantly writing digs against drugs, and he would, in the Western lands, I think he called it chemical corn. Don't let the government, this is my Burroughs, don't let the government fool you with their chemical corn. Is that my message retracted? Oh, wow, this is interesting. I think we have enough legal psychoactives to stupor ourselves. No need to open the floodgates to more. I think so, yeah. Although the thing with those, we had such creativity. It's undeniable in the 60s. Before the politics got out of hand, before marketers realized that the youth had buying power and the whole hierarchy shifted. Right? They've got buying power. Let's listen to what they have to say, right? And by nature, the youth is going to have less sensible ideas than the adults. But that's when it all got shifted. It got shifted through marketing, and it got shifted on the political sphere as well. Because what is politics but just another form of marketing? You know, I'm trying to, you know, let me buy your vote. How can I buy your vote? Pay attention to what you're saying, what the youth are saying, what the youth are buying, what the youth are thinking, right? It all got inverted there. That being said, possibly because of the youth and the confluence of that and drugs that were heavily focused on the mind, you know, LSD, shrooms, weed, mental drugs, there was a great, you know, there was a great output of creativity. There were revolutions popping up all over the place. There was, it was a very busy creative time that gave the world everything from the Beatles to Robert Crumb. It covered a lot, the visual and great explosion, right? And I think when the drugs became more body centered, when cocaine, came into the picture, and smack, and the smack might have I've not done smack, but it might have a mental component to it as well. But I think these are largely body drugs. I think the art started to decline at that point. I think it's inarguable. So I think there's an argument to be made for this psychotropic drugs, and also, and that's another thing too. The pills they sell now. I mean, the reason I never stayed with antidepressants, because I was on them briefly. I'm talking about just 3-4 weeks, because they would say wait 3 weeks, and I would just, if a pill doesn't do anything for me right off the bat, it's almost impossible for me to continue it. So you really have to brainwash people to say, you have to take these pills even if you don't feel anything at all from taking the pills, because to me it's just like eating fluff, and I don't like to eat fluff, and I'd rather have like a real, in the past I would rather have a real tab of acid than just have the big 8-hour cosmic blowout in there and wake up the next day and have some Bovril. Okay, I gotta do some catch up here. Medical marijuana becomes legal in the UK this year. And then I lived in San Francisco where medical marijuana was free. And what you do, there was a racket. You would go to somebody, and they didn't have to be a doctor. They could be like a shaman. This is how broad the definition of San Francisco was. A guy who teaches yoga, like this all counted as doctors. So if I knew somebody who taught like a yoga course, he was considered a doctor. And I could go to him and say, I've been feeling depressed. It's just broad. So broad definition of doctor, broad definition of ailment. And then you give the guy $100, and then you would get a little card that you could take into various places and buy pot brownies and quarter bags. And I never did it, because I just thought, I always dealt with dealers for some reason. The old school, it just felt old school, But to go to somebody like a yoga teacher and claim an ailment, I don't know. I just thought it was a little silly. I think if they are going to legalize it, just say we're legalizing marijuana. I don't believe in the medical thing. I think it's nonsense. Let's at least decriminalize drugs. No need to put people in jail for years because they want to alter their conscience. I agree with this. I agree with that. Yeah. I think the penalties are a bit too high. What everyone wanted was to open their minds and think new things. Not many took loads of drugs. It was more the experience that opened up, referring to the 60s, of course. Yeah. Sorry to ask. I agree with you, Telefaster Rose. Marcus, sorry to ask such a personal question. Do you ever, do you feel like drugs enhanced your own creative work? Because it doesn't seem to me that you're any less funnier now than you were. I appreciate that, Marcus. I really do. I think that it did. I'm sure I would have been weird no matter what. But when I was 14, I had my first drink and my first hit of weed on the same night. And I absolutely fell in love with the experience. And I have drawings from that time. I used to draw a lot more than I do now, but there was something where I would fuck with. There used to be little cartoons. There was something where I would keep the misspellings in, or I would do a bit of nonsense, or and I do think that some inhibitions were broken down, perhaps, that might not have otherwise been. But then again, I don't know. But I appreciate that. That's a nice compliment, actually. It doesn't seem to me that you're any less funny than you now were. I always worry that I'm not funny anymore. That's my major concern about drying up or whatever. There are ways we could do chat. This app called Discord is fairly popular among podcasters. I could try and set one up with permission, perhaps Patreon only. That's a really good idea. I'd be up for that. Definitely. You have my permission. I would love to. You're talking about where people can actually call in, and I could hear their voice. I could do like a Nigel Farage thing. I love it. You don't know, Nigel. I'll never be able to go to France again, Nigel, thanks to you, Nigel. And he just laughs it off with the cigarette laugh. It will be far more controlled than that here. One will have to see a specialist doctor, like a proper GP. Ways we could do voice chat. I'd be up for that. Weed is not like any other drug or pharmaceutical. How is it? How so, Dean? Because it's organic. It's tough to I remember one time in San Francisco, this guy gave me a huge, after a show, he said, I've got some weed if you want it. And it was weed before they, whatever the processing is, before they, now Scott's talking now. Now that we're talking about marijuana, Scott's interested. It's green. Okay, he made a joke there. That's how it's not like any other pharmaceutical. This guy gave me a huge bin liner filled with marijuana, but it was unprocessed marijuana. So it was like he'd basically gone up to the farm or whatever and just, and he was supposed to, and I guess he thought I knew how to process marijuana. But that's how tolerant San Francisco was, that I could, walk back to my flat, a 25-minute walk, middle of the day with a huge bin liner full of marijuana plants, past police officers, they didn't care. As long as you're not engaging in hate speech. If I'd walked by there and said, you dirty, I was going to say some racial epithets here, but you never know who's going to. I always imagine somebody's going to like just take that little section and edit it up, and then this is who he is, and it's a paranoid time, isn't it? It's a time of great paranoia in the world. We can't say this. Scott, anything you want to say about marijuana, other than it's green? Anyway, I think it did. I honestly think an LSD too. I had my first LSD trip at 16. This is kind of funny. I don't know if I told this story. I was 16, and the guy I used to get my weed from, because I fell in love with weed right off the bat, and I was riding, and as you said, most drugs have a far more physical effect. Says Dan. The fact that weed is 100% natural and goes through no process is not insignificant. But it's not the process. I was talking about those plants. Like they do something. You can't just smoke a plant. Like as I tried to break it off the stalk and just, because I never knew how to. I'm not a weed dealer. I didn't know how to process it into the little bags and stuff. But what was I talking about? Oh, my first acid trip. So I went over to my dealer's house one day, and he'd said, the town is dry. Remember, I come from a small town in the Midwest, right? So the town is dry. It just happens sometimes. The weekend, the town is dry. There's no weed in the town. I've got something else, though, he says. And he takes me to the back room, and he puts in my hand a little piece of blotter with Woodstock from Peanuts on the. And I remember reading about this stuff. I was 16 years old. I remember reading about it probably 4 years earlier in one of those anti-drug pamphlets they gave us at school. And this is the bad one. This is called LSD. And I took it with no more forethought. I was actually saying, I took it. I said, yeah, I'll do it. I'm looking forward to this. I've never dropped acid before. My plan was to drop it later that night. And I walked home, and it was a summer day. And as some of you know, weed gets in through the pores, through sweat, and by the time I got home, everything was melting, and, but I didn't have really much, there was little forethought. I didn't go, but what if I want to jump out of a building? It was like, nah, take acid. Can you do a Nigel Farage calling out Junker the Drunker when he says, who are you? We didn't elect you. My Farage isn't that good. I think it used to be at one point. I tried a Farage, and then I was worried that I would be one of those goofball satirists on Mock the Week who happened to have the perfect Farage voice. And I know I probably held myself back. I could have spent more time on it. Now it's too late. But let me, this is called nation state democracy. I can't do it. This is called nation state democracy. Right. It's not him, but I do those. What's the quote? You have the personality of a low-grade bank clerk, and I can't do his voice. I'm sorry, I can't do his voice. I'm nervous. I should have devoted more time to it. I would have had it. No, Jacob Rees-Mogg is a different story, because Jacob Rees-Mogg is a bit more to hold on to, because he's very slow and methodical in the way he speaks. And I think the most important thing one can say when doing a Jacob Rees-Mogg impression is that you must never try to end a sentence with the improper word. There's no us or oz in the Jacob Rees-Mogg. As long as you keep a low register and a very dignified register, you can do it, especially with a long face. And if I had some glasses, I would do the same with some spectacles. But Farage is a bit more. He's got the throaty, who are you? Basically it. But you have the personality of a low-grade bank clerk, and you have the appearance of a damp rag and the personality of a low-grade bank clerk. I mean, once upon a time, that would have been regarded as rock and roll. All the artists would have said, man, Farage for fucking world leader, bro. Not now. How did this happen? How did that lot take over? Ambrosia says, I find it fascinating that humans have always smoked up until now. What, marijuana or cigarettes? Scott's just pining away there. Right, we're coming close to the end. From what I understand, this becomes a video that people can actually watch later. But I don't like this new YouTube shit. I was talking to somebody earlier about these little. The only thing you have to do with weed to get its effect is burn it. I thought you had to process it or something, because I had those big plants and I was just trying to light it up and get a whiff up my Airways or whatever, but let's talk about this new YouTube beta. Because the thing is, this is why I hate computers. They'll have a app or whatever that's working perfectly fine, and you get used to it. And it's busybody work. There's so much busybody work that you have to do nowadays. Got to learn how to click there and that. And that's that's where you find the comments and this. It's busybody shit. But you get used to it, and you go, this is how YouTube works. And then YouTube comes up with something called YouTube Beta, and now you go to this and you don't want to find this and that. And it actually complicates things until you learn the new pattern, and it's all sold under the idea of it's actually making it better, which in fact it doesn't. It's the same shit, So now I can't figure out, when I did a test run of these earlier, and I couldn't figure out how to go back to see that it had recorded. I don't know. It's my first live one. People have used herbs for thousands of years. Yes, in fact, it's a fungus called I believe the ergot fungus. It was discovered in Greece on stalks of wheat. And apparently there was an early forerunner to the wild world of LSD, which was to come many, many years later. The ergot fungus, I believe it's called. So hopefully this will stay up. But so anyway, I say, this is, when they make those new apps, like I haven't been able to check my Barclays account on my phone for 2 years now because they want me to get a new app. So now if I want to know what I got in the bank, I got to go to Barclays. And, but it's just busybody work, because that app was working perfectly fine. It did everything that I needed to do. I could check my balance, and, it was very quick. I didn't see any problems with it. I didn't stop using the app because I thought it had problems and they should make a better app and get a hold of me when you make a better app. It's just one day Barclays decided we're making some improvements. That's a great lie. I mean, every time when the trains aren't running, we're making some improvements. It's not an improvement if the trains don't run. If there's a big ball ache and a congestion and whatever, it's not really worth the sacrifice, because they do run well when you let them run. And the same thing with this. It's like that app was working, but according to you, you've made some improvements, and I can't have the Barclays app until I upload the latest version. And I tried to do that but my phone's full up on storage. So I'm just like, fuck it, I'm not going to go through the ball ache. But the point is, this is busybody work for people in India. I've always believed this. People, give them something to do. So take that job. We could be doing that job here. People fucking shit up. Come up with a new app and fuck more shit up and slow things down. And these would be the only people that are working until they can eventually train hey, Per, how you doing, man? If this is a success, don't worry about it. I'll do one maybe tomorrow, perhaps. I don't know. What was I going to talk about? There's another. Oh, and I was calling. Oh, no, frozen again. That fuck. Oh, shit, man. The motherfucking internet. It should be. So I'll close on this. I was calling Barclays forever. A couple years ago. I need to get somebody in India, and I said, I'm going to take a second. Can I have please for a second about your name, please? Okay, and 1 second, and thank you. Could you ask a security question? Who is your favorite swimming pool? No, I'm sorry, that's what the question says here. It says, who is your favorite swimming pool? No, I said, who is your favorite musician? I don't know where I get swimming pool from. I said, look, man. And then finally one day, it was very obvious. I was getting flustered, because my temper, as you know, with people who don't communicate English. When you're calling an English institution like Barclays, it gets on my wick, And then one day out of nowhere, as I was, going like, okay, please, would you listen for Christ's sake? I am Will Franken, And one day they go, oh, would you like to speak to somebody in England? And I was like, this is after being on the phone for hours with Barclays. I was like, is that an option? I did not know that was an option. And they sent me to Liverpool. And then I know people make the joke of like, yeah, I can't tell the difference. Liverpool, Indian. Yeah, hard. But the point was, I didn't even know it was an option. So, now if I do have to call Barclays, it's like, hello, can I help you? Get me to England. Is there anything I can help you with? No, I want to go to England now. Okay, I'm offering. You don't want to take me up on that. I don't know why. Hello, you got Barclays. Hello. Relaxation is very important. Dopamine, oxytocin, etc. connects us. I concur. I'm a very high-strung individual, and it is good to relax. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been wonderful. Patreon.com is where you want to go to see special content. I hope this sticks up as a regular video and everybody can see your lovely chat. Thanks for joining me today on The Thing.